Good evening, everybody, and welcome to webinar 37. Today we will be talking about Sharenting, and we have Debbie Greaves, who is ready to take over fairly soon. So if you've just joined us, tell us in the chat who you are, where you are in the world, are you a social worker, what area are you in, and let's have a chat. So it's webinar 37. We're going to talk about Sharenting. Past numbers seem to have slowed down, so I think I should hand over to Siobhan now.
Okay, thanks very much, Kelly. I'd say what's really interesting is there seem to be quite a lot of people here from South Africa tonight. Seems to be more, several people from South Africa. So you are all very welcome, and the people who are here from Norway and from Guernsey. So we're very international tonight. So the team are going to be in the chat with you tonight. If you've got any questions for Debbie as we're going through, then use the Q&A box. If you're here for the first time, if you look at your there's like a bar across either the bottom or the top, you've got Q&A as well. So any questions that you're going to have for Debbie, pop those into there. But as Kelly said, Debbie joined us previously. So we are up to webinar 37 tonight. Who would have thought that when we first started these Wednesday night webinars that we're up to number 37? But there we are. And Debbie joined us for webinar number 23 back in November. And I think then Debbie talked to us about use of social media and how that linked in with social work. And she mentioned in that webinar the concept of sharenting, and everybody got really fascinated and really wanted to know more about Debbie's research in sharenting. So we agreed to do, it was like by really popular request, we agreed to invite Debbie back, and Debbie has been so kind to say that she would come back and join us. So I'm just going to hand over. Debbie will introduce herself. Debbie's going to take us through the whole lot, and I'm just going to sit and learn along with everybody else tonight. No presentation from me, all just learning. So if I hand over to you, Debbie, thank you.
Brilliant. Great to be here, and thank you so much for having me again. And please, questions, just put them in the Q&A, and we will have time at the end to go through the questions. But hopefully as we go through, I'll answer some of the questions that you might have. So I am going to talk about sharenting, and I will be kind of focusing a little bit on Facebook because it is still the predominant social media platform for adults, not so much for children, but certainly for adults. And I know that there might well be some professionals in the room and parents in the room, people that are also professionals and parents. So take away what is useful for you. And even though I am going to be talking about children predominantly during this evening's webinar, this applies to other vulnerable groups as well. So if you're sharing information about somebody else, for example, if you're an adult yourself and you're sharing information about somebody in your family who has a disability or vulnerabilities, then some of the tips going to apply to that as well. So hopefully you'll find it useful. I'll just make sure that I can get my slides to work. Where's my little cursor? Yep, okie dokie. So we are going to cover the tip of the iceberg. We're going to look at why people sharen't, including some of the themes that came out in the research, and there were loads, absolutely loads, but I'll touch on a few that might be useful for you tonight. The positives and the negatives, and being really balanced about this, and just being really mindful that there is a wide range of different ways that people express their parenting experiences, and we need to respect that diversity. And we may not necessarily agree with the way other people share their parenting experiences, but we just need to be mindful that there's positives and negatives for in regards to sharenting for parents and also for children. We are going to look at some top tips for respectful sharenting, and you will get the booklet at the end or sent out afterwards, so you can have a look at that online and share that online. And what else are we going to look at is implications and recommendations for social work practice, because we live in a digital space as well as a physical space. So how we can help some of the families that we work with make informed choices about how they share about their loved ones in their family is a really important thing that we need to do as social workers. Okay, so moving right along, and it is the tip of the iceberg, folks. What is it? Okay, so Sharenting, it is a combination of two words. It's sharing about parenting. So it can be parents, it can be grandparents, it can be other people in the family, siblings, and so on and so forth. And it can be on lots of different, you've already talked about lots of different social media platforms there. So it can be social media, vlogging, blogging, live streaming. It can be in public spaces, public platforms, or in small group platforms or personal spaces. And some people do this professionally and make money out of it. So there's lots of different ways people can share it. For the purposes of this evening, we are going to go to the kind of stripped back version of sharenting, and that's where people are sharing on social media with their friends and their family and their contacts. Okay, it is a clunky term and it's very unhelpful because it's sort of, people can get confused about what it actually means. I've had people ask me, does sharenting mean shared parenting? Does it mean something else altogether? And it's very limiting because it infers that we're talking about parenting, but there could be other sharing that is taking place that's not related to parenting. So there's some kind of limitations to the term. The issues here apply if you are sharing about anybody and they lack capacity to make an informed choice about you sharing about their experiences. So what can it include? So it could include lots of different things. So people could be sharing posts, comments, stories, moving or still images. So it could be videos, it could be photographs or other data. And I will be referring to data quite a bit throughout this evening. And I want us to think about data in two different ways. Data is information that we give voluntarily. So if you share something directly in social media platforms or anywhere online, that is data that you've given freely. And there's also data that is inferred. So if you share lots of information about your local primary school or your local Sure Start, for example, people might infer that you have some connection to that. And that's where algorithms come in and target the things that you share will give the platforms greater information about what your interests are and to be able to market to you, basically. So it's just being mindful of that. So when I'm talking about data, it's about those two different things. So why would I be interested in this topic? Well, for a number of reasons, folks. Personally, as a parent myself, just watching with interest how other people around me were sharing about their own parenting experiences online and just really wondering about that and being curious about that. And also professionally, I train around digital safeguarding, internet safety, and I wanted to be able to give people some evidence-informed guidance around this topic rather than just saying, you know, what I thought you should or shouldn't do, because that's not helpful. So, and what I found is that when I started to look at this, folks, is it's a Marmite issue. It's very polarizing, or a Vegemite issue for those Aussies in the room here tonight, just for a bit of balance. And there's probably another type of, I don't know, yeast extract spread that I haven't included here, but anyway. So it is a Marmite issue. Some people really find that it can be quite narcissistic and quite kind of like you're really peacocking and saying, look at my fabulous life by sharing all of this stuff about your children. But actually, on the other hand, what we can also see is that some people would say it as, well, just this is the new normal. This is just a different space in which to share your parenting experience, and it is the new normal. And if you think about the last year that we've all been under, it has been a lifeline for a lot of people being able to share it with other people. So it is a Marmite issue. Okay. And what I also found when I started to look at the evidence is there is a lack of information that's evidence-based around this topic. And if you Google or look at other search engines, should I share about my children on social media, you will see that there's a lot of different views out there about this. And there can be horrific stories about what happens to children if you share online and things like that. So I wanted to look at what the evidence base is and to have a balanced approach in regard to this, because if you start scaremongering that really causes people to shut down. And what we know as adults is that telling people you're wrong, I'm right, never works. So we just need to look at, well, what is the best way that we can help people make informed choices about their engagement with technology, particularly when it comes to sharenting. So that's why I wanted to look at this. The other thing as well is that technology moves so fast and it's overtaken our ability to legislate and educate for a digital age, and that has huge implications for us. So how do we help? And particularly for those of us that are working in social work, where we're working with some of the most vulnerable citizens in our society, how do we help the most vulnerable citizens in our society make decisions today that may have implications many years down the track? Legislation takes a long time to implement. And, you know, I mean, even if you look at today, the UN Convention on the Rights of the Child, General Comment 25 has only just come out this month, and the UN Convention on the Rights of the Child has been around for like 30 years. And that general comment is focused on how children's rights apply in the digital age. So it takes a long time for legislation to be embedded, but legislation is particularly difficult when we're looking at technology, because how do you put boundaries around a boundaryless space? So it is about education. And I just think it's utterly fascinating. And the more I talk about it, the more I hear about it, the more I'm fascinated. So hopefully you'll find it fascinating too as well. And if you don't, that's okay too. So, and this is just hot off the press, folks, the UN Convention on the Rights of the Child. The General Comment 25 looks at how the UNCRC applies in the digital environment. And when we're looking at privacy, it talks about the digital environment presenting particular problems for us when it comes to respecting children's rights to privacy. It also tells us in that general comment that threats may arise from children's own activities when it comes to privacy, but also when parents share photographs online. So if you think about the intertwined nature and the relationship between a parent and a child, when does the parent end and the child begin? You know, if you think about attachment theory, for those of you that love your theory, you know, there's that intertwined nature between baby and parent, but that eventually separates over time, and the child, because they have evolving capabilities, will be their own individual and they need to make their own choices. And there are real challenges there, because when you're sharenting, you're sharing your experience of being a parent, but you're implicating your child's story in that sharing, and that may have impacts on them, you know, further down the track. So this whole bit around the UN Convention on the Rights of the Child and how it applies in the digital age, this is just one little bit about how it applies, but it's just going to provide us with new conversations to have around parents and children and privacy rights. It also talks about states parties. We really need to promote awareness amongst parents and caregivers about respecting the rights of children's privacy and their evolving autonomy, because as they develop, so does their ability to make choices about how much information is shared about them in the public domain and online. And we also need to support parents in developing critical thinking skills and digital literacy skills. This is absolutely crucial and fundamental and should be a key part of social work education and training, and also a key part of social work assessments. We should always be talking about people's digital lives when we're talking about our assessments. Okay, so that's hot off the press, folks. Have a look at that. Really interesting stuff. You know, there's pages and pages of it, but it's really easy to read. So please have a look at that when you have a chance. Okay. So we're just going to have a look before we move on. I just really want us to just focus a little bit about the centrality of technology in our lives. And just even thinking about the fact that we can look at what we're on. We're on Zoom, we're connecting, we've got people from all over the world. Technology is amazing. Technology is fascinating. But the internet wasn't designed for children, it was designed for adults. And so we're having to retrofit this kind of technology so that we can make it a safe space for children. And there's lots of challenges when it comes to the likes of sharenting. So just some statistics for those of you who absolutely love your statistics like me. This is all recent stats, folks. So you can have a look at that. We know the vast majority of people are online. Those who are over the age of 16 are online. They are spending a lot of time online. And it's on mobile devices. So these little devices, these ones, the ones that are more likely to fall down the toilet or fall, you know, end up on the passenger seat for everybody to see, or, you know, get lost, are the ones that we are hooking into to get online. So smart homes, this is fascinating as well, is that we have brought technology into our homes to help us. Brilliant, absolutely brilliant. You don't need to remember stuff anymore because you've got devices that can do that for you. And this is only going to increase to help us, you know, with things like security and heating and lighting. So we just need to think about the centrality of technology in our lives and how that helps us, and also how that can be a hindrance as well. The young ones are spending most time online, and what we know is that 13% of adults never go online. So why is that important to us? Well, it's important because you need to think about the grandparents who are looking after children and maybe sharenting about those children and don't actually understand how social media works, and, you know, how can we increase their digital literacy skills. I'm not going to go through all of that, but needless to say that gaming is awesome. I mean, gaming, kids are so lucky these days. That's all I can say. It's amazing. Virtual reality, augmented realities, mixed reality games, it is brilliant. And the kids have just got such an amazing time to enjoy being a kid. And they can play with so many other people. And I think sometimes as grown-ups, we get all freaked out about, oh, you know, we don't want children talking to strangers on the internet. It's like, yeah, but we can do something to mitigate some of those risks. And the idea of strangers has really negative connotations. But if we're worried about children talking to strangers, have we all ever thought about who we're sharing our photos of our children with? Because it may well be that some of the people we're sharing our photos of our children with are in fact, for all intents and purposes, strangers, because we don't really know them. And some of the research shows that if you actually went through your contacts list, how many of those people do you know and trust in the real world? So we just need to think about this kind of new normal and how people are connecting in so many different ways with so many different people, and what the benefits as well as the challenges are, and how we can help children make the most out of the technology that they've got today, because it's brilliant, absolutely brilliant. Okay, yeah, and we're all using video sharing platforms. Kids are uploading content of their own now. It's not about being famous anymore. It's about being YouTube famous. Kids love all of that sort of stuff. And I do think there's a bit of a generation gap here, because I will hear people sort of say, they'll judge kids and they'll say, what are you watching? You're watching other children play Roblox or play Fortnite or whatever. Why would you watch other people play a game when you can play it yourself? And I think it's a fair question to ask. Well, hang on a minute, Dad, you watch football. Why don't you go outside and play football yourself instead of watching Premier League people play football? And I think that we end up creating this big generation gap between us and young people if we start questioning what they love. And, you know, if something goes wrong for children when they're engaging with technology, are they going to come to us if we say, why are you wasting your time on that? That makes no sense. What, you know, so I think that we just need to be mindful of, this is a really exciting time to be a kid. It's also a really uncharted and scary time as well, because there are harms out there, but we need to look at how we can mitigate against those harms rather than just saying, don't go out there, it's dangerous. Okay, getting back to the topic at hand, Sharenting, by 2030, Sharenting will account for 2/3 of identity fraud facing young people over the age of 18. Now, this is research that was done by the previous Children's Commissioner for England, Anne Longfield, in 2018, looking at really the amount of data that parents are giving away about their children is compromising their safety in the future, because that data is being harvested by cyber criminals. All you need to, I guess, set up a loan or account or to defraud somebody is things such as a a name and an address and a date of birth. And that's easily given away when people start geotagging photographs and saying happy birthday to my beautiful whatever child age the child is. And, you know, they've got an age, a date of birth and a name. So it's just being mindful of what impact today's sharing could have in the future and how much data you've got out there that could be sifted through by someone who really wants to find something interesting to use to their own advantage. A couple of interesting stats here about Sharenting. Parents by the age of 13 have posted 1,300 photographs and photos and videos, sorry, to their children, to social media. Does that blow your mind? This blows my mind. Children themselves post to social media 26 times daily, nearly 70,000 posts by the age of 18. So that's a huge amount of data out there, a lot of data to be used and potentially abused. So it's just being mindful of that. So there we go, bit of stats for you. It's always good to have some stats. All right, so we need to have a bit of a balancing act here. And I just want us to just think about this and have a look at these two things here. So the device that you've got, the one that you use, I want you to ask these questions. If you imagine, Dr. Amanda Taylor from Queen's University in Belfast talks about your digital house, and I want us to use that as an analogy to think about our devices. So if somebody got into your device, into your digital house, the front door of your digital house, where can they roam? What apps can they get into? What can they see? What can they access? Do you have every single door open for them to wander about freely and to take whatever they want and to use whatever they want? If you were to lose your device, because this actually isn't a phone, folks, this is a personal computer. If you had to lug around a personal computer, you might sort of take a little bit more care with it, but it's the smallest, littlest thing. And we talk about it being a phone. It's not a phone. It is a device that we use for so many different functions. So if we were to lose that, can we remotely wipe the data on that? Can we do something to make sure that whatever hands it falls into, the data's safe in that? So if you do start to increase the security, so if you start saying, well, I'm going to make sure that my digital house is really secure and all of my apps are shut down so that people, if they do get into the front door, they're not going to be able to roam about and have a look and open drawers and things like that. But if you increase that security and your privacy, then you're decreasing the convenience and the ease of use. And we like things to be convenient, okay? How many passwords do you forget on a daily basis? So that's a real pain in the backside when you lose a password, you can't remember your passwords, and you're always having to get another password sent to you. So we want that convenience, but if we have convenience, we don't have that security and that privacy. So it's this balancing act that goes on. So when you're doing that balancing act, what I think you need to think about is when you're in social media, what is the balancing act for you when you're in social media and when you're sharenting? So is it easier just to put up a photograph of your child and say, happy birthday to my beautiful, wonderful, whatever age the child is, and share that with everybody, because that's just the handiest thing to do, no matter who that is? Or do you spend time deciding and making a conscious choice about who you share with and who you don't share with? Okay, so that convenience, privacy, convenience and ease of use thing we need to think about. And some people do say to me, well, Debbie, you know, you're very, very, you know, you're going on about all of this security. I have nothing to hide. So why would I be concerned about this? I think that idea of having nothing to hide is a complete misrepresentation of what the issues are at hand. If we turn that question around and ask, do you have anything to protect, as opposed to, do you have anything to hide? I have nothing to hide in my house, but I'm not going to stop random strangers and say, come on in here and have a look through in my house and see that I've got nothing to hide. So it's just being mindful of who has access to your digital life, where can they roam? Do you let strangers rifle through your precious memories and do whatever they want with them? Or do you have some protections in place in order to mitigate some of the harms there. So I hope that's useful just to think about. I might just pause there for a sec and just see if there's any questions coming through. I saw a couple of hands going up.
There is one question actually, and it's quite interesting. Tammy said,
I can't hear that at
for
all.
sharing information about.
I think we're
Hello?
losing you, Diana. So I'll read the question out because I think we're losing you. I think your connection's gone there. We kept losing you. So
Okay.
I'll read it out for you. So it says, can a child take action against a parent for sharing information about them several years prior to the child becoming an adult? I think it's a fascinating question. I'd love to know the answer if you know it, Debbie. I think it's a really
Oh, Struth, and here we go straight to the legal bit. There is the GDPR right to erasure, which equally applies to children. So you can ask for data to be removed. I think probably the softly approach I would say to you is that you should just ask your parents to not share about them. The legal, I think the legal kind of side of it is a little bit problematic in the United Kingdom. I can say that in the United Kingdom it is problematic, and I don't think, as far as I'm aware, that we have had a test case. I know that there have been cases in other countries where children have where parents have been told that they can't share about their children and that they will be fined if they do that. What I would say is that we don't want to go down that route. We really, really don't, because we don't want to be pitching parents against children. We don't want to have to go down those legal routes. If the cases that I'm aware of where it has been a bit of an issue is where there's been contact disputes or separations that have got quite acrimonious, and one parent might be sharenting and the other parent doesn't want that, and that's usually dealt with through family court proceedings. But yes, I think probably the first thing I would say to you is we don't want to go down that road. There are probably legal, I'm not a lawyer, so I can't give you any legal guidance on that, but there would be in law some kind of provisions. And at the very end, at the end of the day, we do have the UN Convention on the Rights of the Child around the right to privacy from your parents, as well as privacy full stop. But I think that what we, and certainly all the research sort of says that that's not where we want to go. We don't want to start going, and that's why I'm focusing on respectful sharenting as opposed to my rights as a parent and my rights as a child, because that actually becomes quite a tug of war. So I would discourage discussing this as a rights-based issue, because you're going to really get into the long grass and get lost for a really long time. So I actually think probably the best way, and I'll talk about this a little bit afterwards, the best way to frame this as an issue is reciprocated values around respect and consent, because respect and consent apply to everybody. So it's about how do we share our family experience in the digital spaces or not, as the case may be, and talking about that from that angle. No, that kind of doesn't give you the, the magic answer that you wanted. And certainly there would be some provisions. There hasn't, as far as I'm aware, there's not been a case in the United Kingdom where a parent has been sued, for example, but there have been cases where parents have been asked to stop sharing part of family proceedings, or when children have said, that they don't like their parents to share about them on social media, and that's been embedded into existing, family proceedings, solutions and resolutions. So good answer, and I'm glad you've mentioned it, because it was one that I actually had on the, the list of things that we might need to look at is around the legal side of things. Okay, so moving right along. The Modern Family album, folks. Do you remember this? Do you remember? Is anyone else as old as I am, where you had to go to the chemist and get a roll of film developed, and you got one, you got one copy, and if you had to get another copy of that photo, it cost you like double. So you were really precious about where, when and where you took photographs and how well you took those photographs, and who got to see them. So back in the day, this great quote that embarrassing Polaroids and stories were small scale mortifications at worst. And I think for the people here today who do share or don't share, or who know people that share, I would just ask this question. When you had your parents open up the photo album, when people came around to the house and they opened up the photo album and said, oh, look at Debbie there, she's a wee baby, and look at her, sitting on a potty or whatever things you do, and that you're just mortified about. Do you really think that you would have wanted more people to see those photographs? Do you want, as a child, as a teenager, would you have wanted your parents or carers to have more people come around, and they bring more people to come around, and they're all sitting around looking and then commenting on your photographs and having an opinion about your photographs? Would you really have wanted that? And I think that's what we need to ask the question is, would our children really want what we're doing? Is this what they want, or is it what we want? And just being mindful of how might they feel about this at a later stage, or indeed at the point where you are sharing about them. Modern family album now has memories from pre-birth to post-death, which I think is absolutely fascinating. In fact, our family album now, you can look, it can be pre-conception. So if you've started a journey to conception, if you're having assistance with, say, IVF and things like that, you can catalogue and curate family albums pre-birth, which is just amazing and mind-blowing. And then post-death. So if you've been in that really tragic, difficult situation where you've had a child die in the family, those memories can continue post-death. So if you have anniversaries each year, when you have an anniversary for that child, people can comment and congregate in those online spaces and comment, which keeps that memory alive. So the memories can be pre-birth and post-death. So it is fascinating. And we know that parenting today is becoming that digitally shared experience. It's not just about what I think, it's about what my friends think, and that kind of shared narrative about what's going on. And then we've got a couple of things here. Stacey Steinberg talks about this, that the fact that search engines can index and cache information, providing opportunity for infinite rediscovery, and also the reach in the digital age is unprecedented, incomprehensible. Can't even say that word, which is ironic. So actually, that one photograph that we used to get at the chemist is gone. It is massive now. We can share. And if you've got your 338 friends and they're sharing with their 338 friends, if you think about it, there's over 114,000 people that could have access to your memories if it's friends of friends. So that can be a great thing, but it can also be a bit of an issue. So it's looking at those positives and those negatives. So why do people share? And lots of reasons. Connection, it's convenient. There's nothing more convenient than being able to pop open your phone and to share things really, really quickly with lots of people all at once. But I guess the other thing there is just to be mindful is that persuasive design technology is designed to make us stay online and to keep consuming and to keep creating and to stay connected. So it's convenient, but it's also quite persuasive in the way that it keeps drawing us in. And I guess, we just need to be mindful of that it actually can, that feedback loop of positivity when people are saying, what a great photo, what a lovely photo, and start to comment, that puffs us right up and makes us think, well, actually, this is brilliant. So we may end up sharing more about our children. So there's that kind of loop that goes on. Self-expression, people will express themselves in lots of different ways, and Sharenting is one example of that. And I don't know about anybody else here tonight, but I got some real experiences of joy and kind of positivity from seeing these parents and these families that were doing these really funny songs during lockdown and sharing those on YouTube. I don't know if anyone else saw them, where they just kept us going, you know, the really funny songs. So you can get joy from watching other people express themselves through sharenting. This is another reason why people share it, is to give advice to others and to also receive advice. And sharing all sorts of experience, the whole kind of continuum of really happy, joyous, fabulous, maybe mundane, boring, monotonous, and then the really sad, tragic. So it's the wide range of experiences that can be shared for all sorts of reasons. And this is another interesting one, is that people do share it as well to raise awareness or funds. And I think this is where that that symbiotic, enmeshed relationship between parent and child can become a little bit problematic. So, and I'll give you an example. If you are sharing about your child who has issues such as addiction issues, mental health issues, maybe an eating disorder, or if they're questioning their gender or their sexuality, all of those sorts of things. If you're sharing your experience of that online with your contacts and your friends, you are giving away something about that child's private life that they can no longer take back. So it's just being mindful of that, and being mindful of that, you know, if you're doing that, what impact is that going to have on that child? And if you're raising funds, you know, for children, if you've got a very sick child, or if your child has a health condition or a disability and you're trying to raise funds for different things, at what point does it become about the fundraising, and at what point does it become about the child? And what if that child doesn't want to be a part of that experience? So there's lots of challenges there, and I think that those things need to be negotiated between parents and children around what's acceptable and what's not acceptable, as we do with existing you know, privacy rules in our own house around, you know, using the bathroom, closing bedroom doors, all of that. How do we negotiate those privacy rules online as well is really important conversations to have, especially as children's evolving capabilities develop. And this is really important too. People share it because they want to, you know, they want to find like-minded others within virtual communities and groups, particularly if they've got specific needs or specific issues that others can help them with. And curating memories, this is really interesting. So if you've got children who are separated from one parent for a lengthy period of time, that parent can curate memories for that child during that period of separation. So and that's something that can't necessarily be done so tangibly, you know, in the real world if they're separated. Okay, so let's have a look at some of the positives. I can see 3 questions there. Do you want me to take a pause here and see if there's any questions that need answered?
I don't know if Diana's internet is working yet, so I just thought, oh, I'll read them. So there's one that says, in a case where you need to talk to a medical practitioner via a social platform that's about your child, and you have to give detailed information about it, how should a parent go about it? So I think that's about, should you be sharing?
Okay.
Because
well,
now
it depends.
Medical appointments, I suppose, perhaps.
Yeah, I think that's slightly different to what it's related, because it is about sharing about your child. But I think the issue there, Siobhan, for me would be around what measures has the professional put in place to ensure there are safeguards to protect the anonymity and the confidentiality of the parties involved. So that's something that I would be saying, is that you need to go back and you need to look at, well, what policies have been put in place to ensure that there is some safeguards there for the parties involved. Yeah, that's what I would say to that one.
Yeah. Okay. And then some of the other things is, it's not questions yet, because we can come back for questions, I suppose, as well. There's other questions later. But there's also, we're having a bit of a conversation in the chat about people who put on dating sites pictures of themselves, but with their children as their profile picture when they're wanting to get dating, I suppose. And that's really surprised me that happens, but there's a lot of that apparently coming out in the chat. So
yeah, and I think, I mean, I guess again, there's this huge continuum of self-expression, and I think that the issue for me there would be that, are they sharing that because they want to be upfront with the people that, look, I'm a parent, so here you are, or is it just that they've not thought through those implications? I guess it identifies a person very quickly as a parent, that your profile for lots of social media will be public by default. So it's who gets access to that photograph. And I would always say CEOP have got a really good video on this, and I can't remember the name of it, but if you have a look at their website, CEOP, they've got different sort of training videos. And one of their videos shows a stranger walking into your house and picking up photographs off your mantelpiece and putting them in their bag and walking out of the house. And I just think that's what people can do. How accessible are your precious memories? And if you have photos such as that, you and your child, anybody can see that. Anyone can do anything with that they want. And it identifies you immediately as a parent or a carer. So there's some challenges there. And I guess to go to that dark side as well, you just need to be mindful that some people will see that and they will use that as a way to, potentially they're going to try and harm you or harm your child, or they might actually make contact with you because you have a child. So you'll be targeted for those reasons. So it can create a sense of vulnerability for the parent, but also for that child. But I can understand why some people are doing it, Siobhan, because it is about being straight up. I'm a parent. Okay, so we'll have a look at some of the positives, if that's okay, and then we'll come back to the rest of the questions soon. So we have talked about this. Have I already said this? No, I feel like it's a bit of a deja vu. It's a modern, the positives. The modern family album, and we've said this, the pre-birth or preconception, there's no end to storage space. I mean, if you had to store all of your digital clutter, where would you put it, really? Because there's so many photos on devices these days. And it keeps friends and family updated, which is great, and it can be so quick. To be able to keep people updated immediately, no matter what the time of the day is, and connects people online, lots of different people about lots of different things, and can reduce isolation as well, because it helps people in similar situations. So if you have a specific parenting issue, or if you have a child with a particular illness, you can connect with other parents and you don't have to explain yourself. They get you. They understand where you're at because they've been through that, and that can really help you. And time and space is no issue. And this is a really big thing for us as social workers. We need to think about this. So back in the days pre-COVID, when you could do parenting groups, you were restricted by the space, the amount of people you could get in the room. Distance was an issue because people would have to travel, and time was an issue because it had to suit people for people to get together. That's not an issue in the online spaces because we don't need to worry. There's always somebody awake in the world. Someone's always up, someone's always available. So if you're in the depths of despair at 2 o'clock in the morning, in your bed, in your pajamas as a parent, and you need to reach out, you can do that. We can't do that tangibly the same way in social work as it is today because we are traditionally a 9-to-5 service, and we don't have that reach and that ability. So time and space is no issue. Flip side to this is the negatives. There's lots of negatives around Sharenting that certainly did come out in the research, that it's not always respectful of children's privacy or dignity. So even if we just sort of flip this and thought about some of the things that we share, would it ever be acceptable to share that about an adult? So would you share a picture? So we've got a photo here of Paula Kokoza, who was fed up with a parent Sharenting and taking photographs of us sleeping, falling asleep in a food, or, on the potty, all of these sorts of things, in the bath, semi-naked, in distress, all of these sorts of things. So would we accept the same Sharenting for every other citizen in our society? And if the answer is no, we have to ask the question, why is it okay to share that about a child? So if children are, say, for example, if they're they're having a tantrum, or they're distressed, or they're scared, or they're, I don't know, having a meltdown, or they're, you know, in any sort of state of undress, would we share the same sort of photograph about you if the roles were reversed, or other citizens? So we need to ask that question. And also that privacy. Privacy is something that we really value as adults, and home is where we can be ourselves and have that privacy away from the rest of the world. But for some children, they don't have that same level of privacy, because parents may well be taking photographs of them and sharing those photographs when, you know, when they're asleep, when they're awake, when they're fallen asleep in their tea, all of these sorts of things. And there's no explanation given as to why that's happening, who those photos are going to, and all of those sorts of things. So it's just being mindful of that, and maybe even just asking the question, are we undermining all of these rights that we are explaining to children about their body, their choice? They have the choice about whether or not a stranger gives them a cuddle, but do we give them a choice about their digital image as well? So it's not just their body that they have a right to make choices about. I would say it's also their digital rights. And explaining to children about why you're taking the photograph, where it's going to be shared, or even asking them, can you take a photograph? Children from very, very, very young will tell you what they want if you ask them. So even starting to instill in them a sense of, you have a right to say no about your image being shared with other people, or who your image is shared with, is really, I think it's a really good thing to start doing with children. So we can also have sharenting being shared, people sharing with unintended audiences. So even this idea of friends only, people will say to me all the time, oh, but Debbie, I only share with my friends. It's like, yeah, but who do you think abuses children? Children are abused by the nearest and dearest. That's what the research tells us. They're not, it's very rare for them to be abused by these random strangers that they have no connections to. So even sharing with people that they know, you know, that can be problematic. So it's about being mindful of that. We also need to be mindful that friends of friends is a way to infiltrate a child's life. So coming back to this idea of our digital house, if somebody really wants to infiltrate your life, your digital life, or your child's life, if they can't get through your front door, they might try a side door or a back door or a window, and that could be through other people's sharing and other people's accounts. That's why I would say it is as a minimum, folks, keep your friends lists private. Don't have them open to everybody to see, because it's a really easy way to clone your account and masquerade as you. And also keep your connections, your family connections, private as well, so that it reduces that risk of people infiltrating your life. I think the other thing that we also need to be mindful of as well is that that apps are invasive. I guess, you know, this idea of free, because people talk about free, well, it's free, social media is free. It's not, it's only free in money terms, folks. You're paying with your data and you're paying with your privacy. So apps are using your data and your privacy as a way, as the currency. So you need to be mindful of that. And research into invasive apps has found that 52% of apps share your personal data with third parties. The top three being, surprise, surprise, Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn. So there's 3 invasive apps that are all sharing personal data with third parties. So you need to be mindful of that. It's only free money terms. You are paying, and it is that symbiotic relationship we have with technology. You are giving away something that then can be used to market to you and to advertise to you and to share with other companies and tech companies and so forth. But you're paying with your data and your children's data when you're sharenting. Okay, so there's safety concerns, and I think that what we need to be mindful here, folks, is that let's not talk about the horror stories. I've heard so many horror stories about, you know, people being, you know, children's photographs ending up on pedophile sharing sites and things like that. Let's keep it closer to home and think about some of the closer to home things. So geotagging, having your location turned on photographs, and people finding out where you live just through the data that you're sharing online can be a bit of an issue. the number of homeschooling pages that popped up on social media at the start of the pandemic fascinated me. You know, and the admins were saying, please share photographs of what you're doing with your kids today, homeschooling, all this sort of thing. Who are you sharing that stuff with? Unless you know who the admins are, you have to ask the question, why do they want my photographs of my children, and where are these photographs going? So it's being curious, being critical, having those critical thinking skills and digital literacy skills, and being mindful of the safety. And also being mindful of, yes, there are predators out there, but there are also people that are profiting. So don't just see it as the predators are the dangerous, scary ones. It's also who's profiting from your data as well. So just being mindful of that too. Okay, it could objectify children as well. So when children become the objects of other people's crusades, for want of a better word, to raise awareness or funds, then those children can be objectified. And then it becomes an issue of, well, whose needs are being met here? And I think that can be an issue too for people. Yeah, Anne Longfield, so she did a report around Who Knows What About Me in 2018, and looked at the long-term implications of current sharenting, and asked questions around, where's this information going to end up? Is it going to have implications for children when they're applying for university or finding a partner or getting a job, all of those sorts of things. So it's just being mindful of where that information goes, being mindful that children can't unshare data that's out there about them. So if you've already outed your child as having a significant mental health issue or a life-limiting condition, they can't unlink that to them. It becomes part of their story. So it's just being mindful of that. Yeah, so data mining and harvesting by others. So that's where people are going to sift through your digital clutter and find out what's there rich pickings, folks. What have you got there that can be used and abused? And, it may be just simply to advertise to you, but could also be for other reasons, such as to masquerade as you, identity theft and all of those sorts of things as well. Okay, and I would say in a minute, yeah, it's also about commercial advantage and just being mindful of that. And I just think what's really interesting here, I was reading something earlier on about, this idea that Google knows more about you than your mother. Just think about that. Everything that you search for, that's all being shared and stored somewhere. So your online habits say a lot about you. So, and then obviously when you're sharing about your children, what does that say about them? Okay. I've already said this, social media is only free in monetary terms. You're paying with your data. So even if that's one thing that you take away from today, folks, just be mindful of that. It was a light bulb moment for me. Yeah, and vicarious discipline and pack parenting. This is obviously from when I did my research. This is where people think they're at their wits' end, parents are at their wits' end, and they do things like if they're emotionally overwhelmed or distressed with their children, and they say things like, if you don't clean up that bloomin' room, I'm going to put a photograph of it on Facebook and show everybody, and kids get mortified about that. And that is really going to, I think anything that you do that is going to breach the fundamental trust between parent and child is not right, folks. It really isn't. And it really does create adversary between technology and parents, and we don't want to go there. So I think that kind of disciplining vicariously or shaming children online is not a good thing to do. Or pack parenting being when you get your friends to comment on how messy your child's room is, or how disrespectful they were today. And there have been horrendous examples of parents that have tried to teach their children lessons about cyberbullying by cyberbullying them, and children having significantly negative experiences because of that. Okay, and finally, the last thing I'm going to say about the negatives is the environmental impact of digital clutter. Now, I don't know if anyone saw this last November. Channel 4 Dispatches had a program which looked at, are your online habits costing the earth? And it was really fascinating. They talked about a an average Instagram post by Cristiano Ronaldo uses as much energy as 10 houses do in a year, which has just blew my mind. It's like, whoa. So we need to pause and think, actually, there's an environmental impact here, because all that stuff you've got out there needs to be stored somewhere. Wherever it's being stored needs to be connected into the grid to keep the thing going. So all of that data, that digital clutter is out there, and we just need to be mindful of the environmental impact of that. Okay, it's 8 o'clock. I'm going to fly through a few more things here. Okay, so these are some of the themes. Women, Sharent more. Dedicated father-centered spaces are similarly lacking online, and that's something we need to be mindful of as social workers. How can we help dads have those spaces online? Social media use both alleviates and exacerbates parenting stress, because you're seeing other people's lives and you're seeing stuff and you start comparing yourself and things like that. So validation is important for mothers more than fathers. And there's this whole bit about liking something and being seen to be liking something. And that's a really big difference. And I think we need to think about that, because if you even just, and this is another thing for you to take away, have a look at your contacts in your social media. Find the most obscure contact that you have, or the one that you don't really have anything to do with. If they came around to your house and said to you, can I have a look through all your photographs from the last 2 weeks? Would you think that's a bit strange? And if you think that would be a bit strange, then you need to ask yourself, well, why are you sharing stuff on social media that they can see? So do you limit your audience, or do you just keep it open? And if you are sharenting, who are you doing it for? Are you doing it for yourself, or are you doing it because the people that are seeing this stuff actually want you to do it? So it's asking those questions. Are people liking it because they really like it, or are they doing it because it's being seen to be liked? And I think it's just this whole thing that we get swept up in, this kind of wave of, you know, liking and commenting, and you just nobody sort of asks that question, is it okay to say I'm not interested in other people's lives, or is that rude? You know, so it's just an interesting kind of theory to think about there. Some concerns as well. I love these raises concerns about mum petitions and fake book. So people sharing stuff that actually isn't really what's going on for them, and feeling that they need to keep up with everybody else. So these kind of mum petitions or competitions for parents. Advice seeking and giving. So excuse me, the vast majority of parents offer help through social media, and time and space is no issue. You can get that immediate support and you're understood. I read about this one mum who was standing in a changing room. She was trying on an outfit to go to her daughter's funeral, and she was overwhelmed. And in the changing room, she reached out to her social network and said she couldn't do it. It was too much. That no parent should have to do this. And she got immediate support from people around the world that understood what she was going through. You can't replicate that in the real world because it was there immediate. Time and space isn't an issue. Getting and receiving help is really important. And if you're thinking about kind of, you know, power imbalances here, it also rebalances the expert and the peer advice. But there are dangers around those echo chambers because everybody's saying the same thing in those groups. The real concern about this advice seeking and giving is the quality of advice offered can be discredited. It can be decontextualized, and it can result in harm. And I'll give you an example here. So parents seek their online communities as a second opinion. Parents don't want to bother healthcare professionals with queries that they might think are quite trivial. And peer influence has a greater impact than professional advice. So I'll just give you a quote here. You can read that here. This is advice that one parent gave to another parent. Now, this advice was for a premature baby. It was about feeding a premature baby. So you can see how this could potentially result in harm if that advice is incorrect or discredited. folks, I'm really conscious of the time, so I'm whizzing through this because I don't want to keep people. We also need to be mindful that community has changed because our online communities are flourishing. And you can use your online communities for raising awareness, fundraising, advocacy, challenging stereotypes, and learning through social media-based programs instead of traditional parenting programs. We can also have that community providing support when parents have to travel long distances and get almost like cheerleaders around them and getting, 5,000 likes from their communities. And for some people, we just need to be mindful that online is going to be more preferable to face-to-face parenting groups. And then you have that merging between online and offline. So where your social media community or your online contacts can provide tangible support like meals or things like that, or tangible support for you. And then there's issues there when you've got younger people and parents who are illiterate, both functionally illiterate and digitally illiterate, clashing, and parents not understanding why these children are so into their devices, and that can cause tensions. So in terms of privacy rights, we've talked about this around family as friends and friends as family has changed. Right to private life, we need to ask that question, does a child have the same right to private life if they're being sharented about? This really interesting stat kind of staggered me, is that 11% of parents ask others to remove their photos of their children. So asking somebody, please don't share my child's photograph on your social media, yet 62% of parents will untag themselves from other people's photographs. So I think that's really important, just to be mindful. Are we more concerned about how we're represented online than our children? And I just love this one from Alicia Bloom-Ross and Sonia Livingston. Little Archie, who was sick and tired of Dad blogging about him, and just asked, Daddy, is this a photo for you or is it for the blog? And Archie went on to take a photo of his dad, a very unflattering photo of his dad eating a sandwich, and the sandwich was going everywhere, and put it on his dad's Instagram page, which I thought, well done, Archie. Okay. Right. So my advice for giving advice, okay, if you are going to give any, I'm talking to the professionals here or anyone who's trying to give advice to others who are sharenting. Please ensure that you're not adversarial about this, kind of that right, I'm right, you're wrong, I know what I'm talking about, you don't know what you're talking about. It doesn't work. You need to have a risk sensible approach to this. People need to enjoy their digital lives in a safe, informed way, and they need to be digitally literate, and they need to be educated. So being non-adversarial is really important, and being positive as well, talking to them about what they enjoy about sharenting. Don't start scaremongering, because that's just a waste of everybody's time and doesn't work, and actually might cause them to become less risk conscious because they'll just dismiss it. And move away, we've talked a little bit about this, move away from this, let's talk about my rights and your rights, that sort of thing, to universal values around respect and consent. What's okay for us as a family to share? What's not okay? And having those conversations. And legal recourse, we've already talked about it, is not where we should be focusing our efforts. It's real nonsense. We don't want to go there. For social workers here, you need to go back and talk to your teams about what's your online presence for signposting parents to counter any information that's inaccurate. If you're not online, you're not doing social work properly. If you're not out there as an organisation, if you think about even Facebook use peaks between 9 and 10 o'clock at night, where are we? Where are the social workers? Who's helping those parents at that time? It's other parents. So we need to really get with that program. Okay. Now, Siobhan, I'll be guided by you. I've got 2 slides here. So do you want me to stop now, or what do you want me to do? It's just the do's and don'ts very quickly.
No, I think the do's and don'ts are important. So you go ahead with those.
Okay. And folks, this booklet you can get online after this. So what I would just say to you folks, top tips: consciously choose who, what, and how you share, and think about future implications. Do you really want the future employer, partner, or schoolmates to see that photo? What we know anecdotally is that some children in schools are data mining other children's parents' social media accounts to find photographs of them from when they were babies that they can use to bully them in school. So do you want stuff just left there? Declutter some of this, you know, put stuff away so that not everybody gets to see everything. Consider whether you'd like that information, photo, or the video to be shared about you. And this is the whole bit around reciprocated respect. If the roles were reversed, would that be okay? Do encourage a culture of mutual respect, and we call this netiquette, and consent. If you ask your child for permission, and if you ask them, is this okay, and they say no, respect that. Discuss and agree online privacy rules the same way we negotiate offline privacy rules. It's really important for children to understand that their body is theirs and their image is theirs. Remember that kids learn from you about what's okay and what's not okay to share online. If they see that anything goes, then that's not going to help them with their own boundaries around what's okay and what's not okay to share. Please don't share anything that could place children at risk. For example, their location, school uniform, date of birth. And I mean at risk from not just predators, but also profilers and online harvesters who are then going to use that information to masquerade as your child. That information is very easy to collect. And also don't share anything embarrassing or private, such as children sitting on the potty, naked, semi-naked, children in any state of distress. I always talk about the granny test. Granny test. If it's not all right for your granny, it's not all right. It's as simple as that. If you wouldn't want a photograph of your granny having a meltdown shared on social media for everybody to laugh at, why would you do it to a child? That's objectification of children, and it's really not fair. So anything that breaches parent-child trust, please don't share that, because that's going to create real challenges for you in your relationship. And don't pack parent. Please don't do that. Final slide, and she lands the Sharenting plane. And I love this one. It's just one for us to think about. With each parental disclosure, a bit of the child's life story is no longer left for the child to tell under his or her own terms. Equally important to the right of the child to one day narrate his or her own story is the child's right to choose never to share the information at all. And I think that's a really nice way to end this conversation, folks. So thank you. I know that I've kept you a little bit longer than I should have, but I could talk until the cows come home about this. So I hope that's been useful for you, and I'll hand it over to the lovely team, and you can tell me if there's any questions or comments.
Thank you.
That need answers.
Thanks so much for that, Debbie. I think it was brilliant. The chat was, people were really learning a lot from it. People are saying it's a very useful, informative webinar. People were saying earlier, oh, I don't mind if you overrun because I just want the information. So I think it's been a really great session tonight. Thank you so much for that. And I know that we're going to send out the link to the booklet that you were talking about to people who were here. Di and Kultuma are now doing the follow-up emails for people who've been to the session. So you should get that come through to you soon. So thank you ever so much for that, Debbie. It was great.
You're very welcome. Thank you.
Just to let people know before you go, our webinar next week is all about assignment writing. So we're going to give you some top tips on how to improve your assignment grades. We're going to be bringing some examples of good assignments and so on. So I think David is just putting into the chat now the link for you to register for next week. So you can register now for next week's session, which will be led by the Connect team, and we'll all be giving top tips on how to lots of top tips on how to improve your assignment grades. So thank you very much. I can see now, I don't know if you can see the chat, people, but Debbie, but people saying I'm off to delete a lot
now, yeah.
friends. So people are going to go and defriend lots of people, I think, after now.
Oh, yes.
But I think some really top tips there. I think not just for us as professionals, but also for us as parents or grandparents as well. So some really good stuff there. And I'm so glad that you did come back and tell us more about Sharenting, that we all were fascinated by when you were talking in November. People are saying working in a high school, social media is always high on the agenda, and that's helpful. Kultuma's on placement at the moment, I think, in a school. And so there's lots of school settings that we're all working in that we can take lots of ideas from this. I was thinking about that, especially when you were talking about the bullying and how people are harvesting, you know, photos and using those to cyberbully. That was something I'd not really thought about that really struck me. So thank you very much. And it also led to loads of chat about just adult care homes as well, who are now starting to share things a lot online. And I remember I saw some photos just today on Facebook of a care home that showed lots of older women holding baby dolls, but it was I felt very infantilized and wasn't presented well at all. And those women hadn't been able to consent to those photographs being shared online, and they'll be used really widely, I think. So it's not just about children, it's not just about Sharenting, is it? All those issues you talk about are wide issues, I think.
Absolutely. And I think that's why I'm saying, folks, it's not just take this away. This is about sharing about anybody else who doesn't have the capacity to understand where this information is going to go. And if somebody else is profiting from it, it's really problematic. So, yeah, thank you.
Yeah. Thank you. So thank you ever so much for joining us. Thank you again to Debbie for leading us in a fabulous session, and hopefully we'll see you all next week, hopefully. Bye, everyone.